It's been a long time. How have you been?
Narrowing down a list of my top 10 favorite video games of all time wasn't easy. At times, I'd say it was downright painful. But over the past few years, I've noticed that no one experience has even come close to dethroning the following titles. Dating back to the mid-90s when I started my trip through the ever-evolving matrix of interactive entertainment all the way to the current day, these games represent the cream of the crop, ranked on a number of factors. How well has the game held up over the years? What innovations did it bring to the table? And more importantly, where does it rank on the almighty nostalgia meter? Not much else to say. Currently, these are my top 10 favorite video games.
Here we go.
Strangely enough, the number 10 spot on this list was the most hotly contested of the bunch. Which game was I willing to sacrifice while the rest frolicked in the fields of Elysium? I gotta say, it wasn't the easiest decision, but after some time, the choice was clear. I cannot, for the life of me, understand why the Jak and Daxter franchise hasn't enjoyed the same lifespan as others of its ilk, because what's on display here is undeniable platforming bliss. The story, involving the transformation of a young villager into a weird otter/weasel hybrid,
Man, that stung!
has the titular duo traversing an abundance of interconnected areas attempting to find a way to reverse the process. And punch yaks. Now, I will admit, this game practically breaks the nostalgia meter. We're like one entry in and this thing's already busted. Seeing those commercials on Toonami when I was a kid, I could not have been more excited to take on whatever this world was keen to throw at me. For good reason, too. The controls and overall feel of this game remain incredibly tight and responsive to this day, with Eco, Jak and Daxter's version of power-ups, being sewn into the fabric of the world itself. No load times between areas. That was like a goddamn magic trick back in 01. Tack on consistently enjoyable level and mission designs, you're never doing the same thing for so long that it feels repetitive or boring. To me, this was one of the most freeing experiences I'd ever encountered in a virtual world. Those invisible walls that plagued my existence in the past, they were long gone. I mean, you get eaten by a giant horrifying fish monster if you swim out too far.
This is awful in every way. If I could kill it, I would.
But it never felt like the game was actively restricting you. For once, the quote on the back of the box felt pretty genuine in this regard. Honestly, I don't have like a single problem with this game. I go back to it every so often just to relax and take my mind off the fact that the real world is making like Katniss Everdeen in Book 2. It's probably one of those situations where this trumps both of these. But I'm gonna be honest with you, I just don't care. Jak and Daxter is just too good for me to care. If you're at all subscribed to this channel, which I'm pretty sure there's a button for that somewhere around here, I'm assuming you're at least somewhat familiar with the Danganronpa franchise. It's a visual novel series focusing on a group of gifted high school students that is forced to participate in a sort of killing game to escape imprisonment. Kill one of your fellow students without being identified as the culprit in a class trial, and you go free. Otherwise,
it's over. We are screwed.
But out of every game in the franchise, I tend to favor the original, Trigger Happy Havoc, for introducing such a strange, hypnotically addicting concept to the masses. It's no doubt light on the video gamey elements of most other games on this list, but the story and characters here, they're god tier. Legitimately, I remember playing this game, going to work the next day, and just thinking, Jesus Christ, like, who's going to die next? And just not doing any work because I was engaged in premature mourning periods. Danganronpa certainly coasts on its narrative, as well as a triple S ranked soundtrack. And for that reason, I'm sure I'll look back on this list a few years from now and think, really? Danganronpa made it on this list, and not something that both plays well and delivers a knockout story? But here's the thing. I just can't deny how head over heels I was for this franchise as a whole because of this one game. It remains one of the most popular videos on my channel for a reason. People just can't seem to get enough of Danganronpa.
I've heard your story! Well, I wasn't listening, but who cares?
Oh, Uncharted 2, you are such a good game. And back in 2009, you surely held a place in my top 3 easy.
Thanks.
Primarily because at the time, there was just nothing else like it. Its pacing, its set pieces, the acting, the music, top of the line, cinema quality. Back before things were so Last of Us melodramatic and open for no reason at all, back before the set pieces were held together by duct tape in Uncharted 3, Uncharted 2 was ghost riding its train straight down the collective gullet of anyone seeking a gripping Indiana Jones-esque adventure full of tight, helicopter-slaying action. Following the swashbuckling misadventures of Nathan Drake and his army of journalist, thief, old person, and cameraman, the player is bounced from one set piece to the next in search of Marco Polo's lost treasure, said to be hidden in the mystical valleys of Shambhala.
Shambhala? Nate?
Yeah, you know, Shangri-La.
Can I have a word with you, darling?
To this day, there are few experiences like it. Barring a subpar opening stealth section, Uncharted 2 puts the pedal to the metal and rarely lets off the gas, set to the tune of a third-person shooter emphasizing good old-fashioned improvisation. And the game's climbing mechanics coupled with impeccable level design lead to moments that will stick with you long after you've turned the console off. Tack on a near-perfect presentation, having each actor deliver their lines while performing motion capture.
You better pray that he is not bluffing.
And what's left? A gripping story? Yeah, that's here too, matched in tone with sharp writing. What else you got? Music? Not a problem. A multiplayer component that doesn't suck. Yeah, well, we had that. It's sort of gone now. But I will say that its last few days online were some of the most fun I have had with a multiplayer mode in quite some time. Fact of the matter is, even though Lost Legacy might have had a better train sequence, Uncharted 3's set-piece moments were 10 times more insane, and Uncharted 4's presentation was in a league all its own, Uncharted 2 remains the pinnacle of this franchise. And I don't plan on changing my mind anytime soon.
What's that saying? Fortune favors the bold? Yeah, right. Lucky me.
I chose something different. I chose the impossible. I chose rapture.
If I were to attempt to describe BioShock to a complete stranger, by the end of the conversation, I'd probably end up in an insane asylum, or signing a 4-year book deal, whichever comes first. Truly, Ken Levine's magnum opus remains a blueprint for how to build a convincing, shockingly realized world.
Welcome to Rapture, the world's fastest growing pilot joke.
The hallways of his underwater utopia turned nightmarish hellscape are full of genetically altered splicers, and little girls ushered from one dead body to the next by their elite guardians, the Big Daddies. Surviving a plane crash, our protagonist Jack is woefully introduced into this fragile ecosystem. Rapture is a city packed to the hilt with environmental storytelling. In fact, much of the narrative is filled in through audio diaries, a clever technique that gives us multiple perspectives on the same issue.
I believe in no God, no invisible man in the sky.
Guiding us through the warped and twisted philosophies of Rapture's grand architect, Andrew Ryan. BioShock scoffs at rough edges. It's a game so tightly paced, so narratively rich, that it's easy to forget how fantastic its gunplay looks and feels. The freedom of choice provided by its ability modifiers, the shocking in-game twists. In a year heralded as one of the industry's greatest, it's telling that BioShock is often cited as one of 2007's best titles. And out of every game on this list, this is the one that changed spots the most. And on a perfect day, I could easily see it landing somewhere in the top 3.
Look at the bright side. Maybe it'll be quick and painless.
Regardless of the generation, Final Fantasy ceases to be anything but final. These games have this insanely weird pull that makes it tough to get out of orbit. Maybe it's the franchise's dedication to cinematic excellence on multiple fronts, the charm its characters oftentimes exude, or the fact that, regardless of which game you play in the series, you'll most likely be getting an experience that you could easily define as truly unforgettable. Even Final Fantasy XIII. Then you're getting unforgettable for all the wrong reasons.
What's our motto? Suck. Suck. Suck!
The fact is, I'm about to break the rules here, because my two favorite entries in this franchise hit way too hard that I cannot for the life of me figure out which I would sacrifice as my final Aeon to defeat Sin. And that should have definitely tipped you off as to what my first pick is. Final Fantasy X represents a sort of milestone in my video game career. It was my graduation from silly polygonal platformers and frictionless hedgehogs to deep character development funneled through an excellent plot, and gameplay that was more than the sum of its parts. Living in a futuristic society, our protagonist's city is attacked by an enormous whale beast known as Sin, who not only destroys his home, but thrusts our hero into the foreign land of Spira, where summoners take on a religious rite to thwart the beast's seemingly endless cycle of death and destruction at whatever the cost. Final Fantasy X was unlike anything I had played before. I had to think and strategize, building a team of guardians so that maybe one day, this world, this insanely beautiful, vibrant world, wouldn't have to be afraid anymore. I have a deep connection to Final Fantasy X. I think it has one of the better combat systems in the franchise, and it also gives the player a nice sense of progression through its sphere grid system, allowing for complex character builds should you be into that sort of thing. It's also a masterclass in effective world building. Spira is one of the most finely crafted video game environments I've ever had the pleasure of exploring. Now, I want you to take all of that praise, pretty much everything I just said, and apply it to its more successful younger brother. What begins as a group of freedom fighters attempting to save the planet from a corrupt organization quickly turns into a fight for survival against a silver fox overcompensating with his giant uber sword and propensity for warmer than average temperatures. What makes all of this even more impressive is that Final Fantasy VII didn't have any voice acting, or non-polygonal characters, or insane laughing sequences. It was just a massively impressive RPG. It had a stellar combat system, phenomenal characters that actually made you feel those pesky emotions underneath all of those jagged shapes, and a soundtrack that can't be called anything other than flawless. It certainly has its share of liver spots, and while the remastered version doesn't necessarily reverse this game's aging process perfectly, I feel like what's on offer here, I don't know, you can just sort of feel the developer's passion for this project. From the boss fights to the memorable side quests, Final Fantasy VII just oozes charm, while still managing to punch you in the gut whenever it feels like you're getting just a bit too comfortable. I have videos over both of these games on my channel if you're looking for extended thoughts, but needless to say, both 7 and 10 deserve a spot on this list. The exact same spot. And again, you can't change my mind.
Irritating. I know.
It's Christmas 2007. I'm sitting there with a brand new copy of Mass Effect and Super Mario Galaxy. Two incredible games in a year where they were practically growing on trees, with the likes of Call of Duty 4 Modern Warfare, the aforementioned BioShock, the Orange Box, Assassin's Creed, I could go on. I remember trying out Mass Effect first, and yeah, it was pretty good. I got to punch people when they didn't agree with my long-held unflinching beliefs. But Mario's 2007 outing across the cosmos was the clear winner, not just over Mass Effect, but over every other game that year. Galaxy shocked me. It is platforming perfected. Nintendo has this really weird knack for taking a single unique mechanic, the gravity shifting, and milking it for all it's worth. And not in a bad way. You can tell that the developers are just having fun. That feeling comes through 100%. The first time I skated on platforms of lava or navigated a gravity-defying donut in the middle of space, it just put a huge smile on my face. This game is here because from every conceivable perspective, it's practically flawless. Presentation, just about as good as you're gonna get on the Nintendo Wii platform. Gameplay, as we've pointed out, pretty much perfect. Music? At the end of the day, I play video games to have fun. That's Super Mario Galaxy. And as Nintendo of America's previous president and chief operating officer once said,
"If it's not fun, why bother?"
The Legend of Zelda franchise. It had to show up here eventually. I knew it, you knew it, he knew it. It's not like I don't have plenty of options. Ocarina of Time is widely regarded as the series' first perfect entry, for years after it was heralded as the greatest video game of all time. For good reason. It pioneered the three-dimensional action-adventure title, introduced a lock-on system that would worm its way into pretty much every game that followed in some way, shape, or form, featured a massive overworld for the time, and can we just stop right there? I don't think I can fully make you appreciate what it was like stepping out onto Hyrule Field for the very first time. Back on the N64, we never saw these massive Apex Legends style maps. So seeing this for the first time blew my goddamn mind. Take this quote, put it right here, because that is this, and it was incredible. Link's journey through time to save Hyrule from Ganondorf's sinister organ music is iconic in and of itself. The dungeons, the combat, just absolutely stellar for its time. And if you played it as a kid in the late 90s, it is the embodiment of childhood nostalgia. Every note of this intro is somewhere in your brain, whether you're willing to admit it or not. Now, it hasn't aged insanely well, but it's well over 20 years old at this point, so I'll give it a pass. Ocarina of Time was a blueprint for this industry, and easily ranks as one of gaming's landmark titles. But is it better than Majora's Mask? I'll be honest, I think Majora's Mask is one of the most well-designed video games ever created. Unlike its predecessor, it has aged extraordinarily well in my opinion. There are so many moving parts to this game that I'm frankly shocked that the cartridge didn't just burst into flames. It's a decidedly darker experience, asking a lot more of the player than Ocarina of Time ever did. But it's also far more personal. Set to a 72-hour doomsday clock, you'll frequently have to rewind time back to the first day in order to prevent the moon from winning at the most intense game of chicken you've ever seen. Seeing people you've helped, people you actively took part in healing, walking their same paths over and over again upon each reset was a powerful reminder of your mission to break the cycle once and for all. The use of masks to mark and contribute toward your progression was a masterstroke in game design. The fact that the moon lingers over your head every moment of every day, the characters who, shocker, actually have character, it's like it's engineered to be this unforgettable experience. Ocarina of Time and Majora's Mask are two sides of the same coin, and to quote GameTrailers.com's retrospective over the franchise back in the mid-2000s, from a gameplay perspective, the two Nintendo 64 titles complement each other beautifully. One brought the humongous land of Hyrule to life in two eras for the price of one, and the other sought to look closer at the world and the intricate characters living in it. Essentially, each one has what the other doesn't, and many consider the sequel to be as exceptional as the original. But are they better than Wind Waker? The pure, unadulterated hatred aimed at this game's presentation is the epitome of don't judge a book by its tune, Link. This seafaring voyage across the Great Sea is arguably one of his best, taking everything that made these games so memorable and fantastic and pushing them exactly where they needed to go. Into the ocean! Wind Waker was responsible for injecting a surprising amount of personality into the franchise. And Link's quest to save his sister from the Forsaken Fortress made for an adventure that felt not only personal, but epic in scale, eventually leading our hero to the Master Sword and the Triforce of Courage itself. Its swordplay was more refined, exploration elements were expanded, and through it all, its presentation, considered its weakest aspect well into the marketing phase, turned out to be its greatest strength. That's not to mention a soundtrack which, even by Zelda's near-perfect standards, was practically flawless. More importantly, Wind Waker was a game that I managed to finish completely on my own. No guides, no older brother holding my hand as I trudged through a mind-bending dungeon. Just me. These were my victories, and I felt that. Plus, if you beat the game once, you can play through it again in your pajamas. So where does that leave us? One title that essentially invented the 3D action-adventure game, another that represents timeless video game design techniques, and a third that may as well own the nostalgia meter. Ladies and gentlemen, number 4, the Triforce, the holy trinity of Zelda games from my childhood that all encapsulate the essence of this list: innovation, timelessness, nostalgia. 3 entries for the price of 1. And before you say anything, no, none of this makes any sense, but I'm doing it anyway. Number 3. Coming from such a prestigious license, I expected Dragon Quest VIII Journey of the Cursed King to be pretty solid. What I got was a rare, uncut diamond radiating absolute perfection.
Uh-oh, here comes trouble, Gov.
An evil jester, Dolmagus, has covered a castle in deadly thorns. The king has been turned into a troll, his daughter into a white horse, while you, a castle guard, were unaffected by the curse. Resolute, the group journeys across the land in search of Dolmagus, hoping to reverse his spell.
We must go after him at once!
It's very much a throwback to classic RPGs, while its competition featured flashy, over-the-top cinematics where, like, what the f*** is even happening here? Dragon Quest VIII was building its world and its characters slow and steady, its presentation bringing Akira Toriyama's designs into glorious 3D for the first time in the franchise's history. That's not to mention the American version was blessed with some of the best voice acting this side of most 90s anime dubs.
These nasty humans and their ships! Always sailing at the poor Calamari's head!
You can tell they're giving it their all, that's what's important here. And you thought Link was the pot-smashing king. You've never seen insert hero's name here. Charm is the name of the game here, people, and Dragon Quest VIII has it in absolute spades.
Prepare to meet your maker!
For the love of God, some monsters won't attack you because they just feel like bathing themselves. To say that its soundtrack is godlike would frankly be doing it a disservice, which is a bit weird because I called it that in a previous video and just that's neither here nor there. Its combat stripped down to the bare essentials. Nothing complex, but challenging nonetheless. Just perfect. Truly endearing towns and wonderfully designed quests highlight the importance of top quality weapons and gear. And every element just feeds into the next with such fluidity, from the alchemy to the monster hunting. I honestly can't say anything bad about this game. From the opening credits, it's clear. You're about to go on an unforgettable adventure through a world of monsters, magic, and whatever the hell this thing is.
Sweet Jesus!
It's funny, I'd say a lot of games on this list have defining moments. The train sequence, Aerith's death, but there's not a single moment I can pick out of Dragon Quest VIII. Not because they aren't there, but because it's not a game anchored by a singular set piece. It's right there on the box. This is a journey, defined by every encounter, every story beat. And it's one adventure you'd be a fool to skip out on. Also, it's the only game I know of where sex appeal is a stat that can be leveled up, so that's interesting. When I first started making this list, having already selected the games that would go on it, I used a program online to move around each entry into random spots to get a feel for where things were sitting. Originally, this next game sat at number 10, but as time went on, it slowly moved up the ranks like some sort of sentient reverse Slinky. Save for one game, I just couldn't justify putting anything else above it.
Used to be a cop myself, only for a day though.
Resident Evil 4 is the quintessential third-person shooter, a landmark title, not only for its genre, but the industry as a whole.
I was wondering if you might recognize a girl in this photograph?
Following U.S. Special Agent Leon S. Kennedy in his attempts to rescue the president's daughter from a Spanish cult, Resident Evil 4 turns up the heat by smothering the player in a foreboding sense of tension that rarely goes slack. All the while, Leon's slinging quips and one-liners at virtually anything with a face. And to my shock, it actually works incredibly well.
I've sent my right hand to dispose of you.
Your right hand comes off?
RE4 is the gold standard, not just because of what it pioneered with its camera placement and interactive cutscenes, but for how stellar its pacing is across 2 separate discs. And the experience is very much tailored to how you play. Purchasing and upgrading weapons in your loadout is one of the keystones of Resident Evil 4's design, ensuring that each subsequent playthrough feels wholly unique. Barring the Wii version, aiming without a reticle places you firmly in Leon's shoes. You'll feel the kickback of every shot. Enemies react based on where they've been hit, and knowing when to move in close for a crowd-clearing roundhouse kick is all part of the game's intricate ballet of creating space where there seems to be none. Real talk, I've completed this game probably about 13 times, and each time I discover something new secrets, some odd new technique that takes the phrase murder of crows to a very literal disturbing place. That's not to mention Mercenaries mode, a slew of unlockable content, or the fact that your weapons, items, and loot carry over once you begin a new game. In terms of game design, presentation, story, replay value, Resident Evil 4 is at the top of the class, the necessary shot in the arm its franchise needed to stay relevant. And in a lot of ways, it's still doing that today. I mean, look at how many consoles you can play this game on. Coming soon to a toaster near you. Video games have been a passion of mine going on almost 30 years now, and over time, it's easy to become a bit jaded. I find I'm far more critical of a lot of big-budget modern-day releases than I would have been even 10 years ago. Burnout began to set in quick. Sequelitis was taking its toll, and no matter what game I played, I had a list of criticisms at the ready, because, in the words of Kenny Rogers, they just don't make them like they used to. My number one pick was The Exception. Representing the freedom of expression and joy of exploration this medium is poised to deliver. The Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild is far and away the best game I've ever played. And folks, when I say far and away, I'm not exaggerating. It's not even close. In terms of open world design, Breath of the Wild is on another level. So much so that, to quote my girlfriend, this game essentially ruined other open world games for me. Icons don't flood the map, it's all about spotting landmarks in real time and making decisions on where you want to go, not where the game is funneling you toward. I can't say enough about how freeing this world feels. Virtually every vertical surface is negotiable. Parasailing allows for rapid, enjoyable traversal. The story touches on some nice emotional themes present throughout the franchise. Even combat's focus on weapon degradation to promote variety in your approach is handled pretty well. And yeah, I know it's a sore spot for some, but the game's mechanics are built around these systems. And the fact that you can go online and still find new videos showing off things you didn't know about Breath of the Wild just goes to show you how well each of these seemingly arbitrary puzzle pieces of game design interlock to form what I consider to be the franchise's magnum opus. To list off everything that makes this game a complete genre-defining masterpiece would be a fool's errand. Everything, even watching as villagers react to a sudden change in weather, comes off as almost magical, ahead of its time. I'm sure it has its flaws, the durability system, the lack of dungeon variety, but here's my counterpoint. I just don't care. When a game is this good, any sort of criticism comes off as a nitpick. No, Breath of the Wild is not perfect, but in my opinion, it's about as close to perfect as I've ever seen a game get.